Hey everybody, welcome to X's for Show, and this very special episode we debuted my baby. My child was on screen for the first time ever with us. I'm Nico, and you can find me at Nico Action, and of course my child is the perfect Godzuki, looks just like JoJo.
I'm TK, I have no children, and I'm going to keep it that way.
Well, I feel like you feel kind of affectionate toward Kong, though.
Is there a baby? I'm sure there's a baby Kong somewhere in the mix. I'm excited about this new one in the new movie with the bionic arm. That could be my child.
There's so many babies for us to have, and I'm your producer, Kevo, and they are all my babies. And today we are talking monsters, Monsterverse, and monster excitement.
You know, in the modern age, it can be really difficult to lose sight of kind of like these classic monster movies, because they have been so relegated to kind of the funny haha scrap heap of time. But this has been such an incredible era for these monsters, whether it's the rightful king, Godzilla -1, or it's this actually really well-intended attempt to bring back this idea of monsters. You know, it's 2024. Monsters don't have to just be PR agents driving SUVs after parties. So I think the big thing for me with this franchise is I want to start with the big question. Who's your monster? I gotta be honest. There is something about a real yoked out fucking King Kong with that fucking trap back that gives, you know, real good Harry John Cena vibes. You know, it's like Jesse Aries at the top of his game. So I really love me some sexy Kong. That is where it's at. And otherwise I like Mothra a lot. She's amazing. So
True.
Mothra is really high on my list. King Ghidorah is awesome though. It is a real toss up between those two. In this iteration, I really do love Mothra. This iteration really did Mothra right.
Mother, yeah,
she is Mother. Yeah, 100% that.
Hey, Allie, Nerds on Monsters, how did y'all know I had this fetish? You know,
We just throw stuff at a wall and hope that we get it right, and this time we nailed it.
Yeah, I hope you share my uncomfortable attraction to King Kong. If not, I'll be alone on this one because Jonah left me hanging out here.
Well, he'll be back for the second installment that we have, because today we'll be talking a lot more of the movies that have come out so far and excitement for that. And then next week, we will be tuning in for the finale of Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, which we've been watching since November. And it's what got us so stoked on this Monsterverse in the first place.
Most pirated show on the internet. Yes, Hunty, get your ripoffs. All right, but Kevo, who's your monster?
I want to say the man himself. I want to say Godzilla. You know, she's giving glowing blue energy. She's giving pink soon, which we all love. We love pink on this show. So yeah. I'm just following your energy. We're very dragged because of the premiere of Drag Race last night. So
yeah. It was it happened. I would love to see Godzilla's sexy number where Godzilla slips and that's the take they have to use. Anyway.
I mean, that's a lot of these movies.
Okay, yeah. Let's start with something that I just really want to say, first off, right off the bat. I watched an unbelievable couple of shorts. It's like there's 7 or 8 of them all together, and none of them are longer than 3 minutes of Pokemon Resort, Pokemon Concierge. Behind the scenesy stuff, right? And one of the things is they purposely stop motioned in unnecessary movements, and that was one of the most unbelievable things to consider, because then when I really thought about Pokemon Concierge, my damn animated series of 2023, but yeah, Godzilla does so much unnecessary kind of stuff. Like when I think about Dragonzord is very like very measured movements, very exactly what he's got to do. He gets in, he gets out, and that's sort of my mental window for this stuff. This Godzilla, he is just chewing the scenery. It is Jack Nicholson, Al Pacino, and Robert De Niro levels of just, but listen to me. You fuck this building with me? You want to fucking fight about this building? You, by the way, okay, everything else is canceled because Ali Galactic just had the idea, which is Chu Wong Fu, thanks for everything with the kaijus. And that's To Kaiju, thanks for everything, Julie Newmar, who should still be Catwoman in that.
Yeah. So this could go one of two ways. It could be Godzilla, King Kong, and Rodan, or it could be King Ghidorah's 3 heads.
So I have a whole thing where I think that we should sub in other people for different people. So like I want like, instead of Rodan, I would love like Roseanne Cash to come in with that 7-year itch, right? Because I'm not going to say the other one. But no, I think there's a lot of room for how much fun there is in the richness of language, like discovering that, you know, Godzilla actually is, as a name, an unfortunate element of back when people didn't check what white people said publicly. And that is how we wound up with Godzilla as a sort of different take on what it was supposed to be.
Wait, did you just find that out?
No, I was reminded of it, but finding out that...
Because you know when I found it out?
When was that?
In the 1996 Godzilla, when what's-her-name goes, it's supposed to be Gojira!
You moron!
Is that my precious Beth from News Radio?
No, it's the blonde lady.
It's not Kira Sedgwick. It's hold on.
Oh my God! Could Kira Sedgwick please just like punch Godzilla in the face? Like, I would watch that movie because I think we can all agree that Kira Sedgwick is a kaiju, and we are blessed to have her. I love her.
Maria Patillo.
Yes, Maria Patillo, whose career didn't really go super wild after that, which I don't think she deserved. She was great.
Kevin, that lady that you think is funny, but she just makes me feel really uncomfortable, Maria something?
Bamford, but I don't think Maria Bamford is funny.
Yes, Maria Bamford.
She's similar to Maria Bamford in terms of being a tiny blonde white woman. But I also always forget this movie had Doug Savant, which is a huge redeeming factor for it.
Okay. So one of the things that I think is really great is that Godzilla has become such an incorporated part of our understanding of Japanese cinema. And I think that's a little selling an entire culture short for their main imported item. But one of the things that I think is really great about the history of what Godzilla films has allowed me to understand is when I did my necessary research to be able to hang in on this episode, I had no idea how many like splinter cannons there are for like classic Godzilla. There's like, and like there's angels and it's crazy, but it's really fascinating to understand how, you know, in American cinema, we say that it's been 15 years, superheroes are done. In the UK, they're like, well, we will sooner cancel the franchise than have somebody that doesn't look like the Prince play Bond. But, you know, Japan is so excited about some of their ideas, which are actually based on, you know, Americans being horrible, like Godzilla. And they have been able to create such a powerful, incredible, dynastic film franchise out of it that we're still aping it today, albeit less successfully.
Aping.
This was for me a really tough sell. This and the I forget who owns it, but like the Dark Universe with like
Universal, because it was
Universal.
Dark Universe, which would have been so cool if they had anybody else in it.
Yeah, with Invisible Man and Frankenstein and Dracula. These were the two that I was like, no, everybody wants to have a franchise, and that's annoying. But I've sort of turned around for two reasons. One, we as a consumer base are failing creators by constantly spending money on franchises. And so kind of giving the lesson that that's what has to happen. Two, while I do see these films as a sort of blatant attempt to get a franchise going, I don't think they're a failure in that regard, but it really took until Monarch came along and sold me on a lot of the ideas, and also did the one thing that none of the movies have been able to do so far, which is phenomenal character work. That I got really into it. Because the fact of the matter is, the Marvel movies, no matter what you think of them, throughout 31 plus films, there has been some good to great character work. Not all of them, not all the time. Whiplash is never going to get credit for being great character. Basically, no villain is.
And just to even add to that, there are characters that they would be able to go back and redeem as a result of doing 31 consecutive films in like 6 years.
Right. Well, and that the other thing is that because they have done that, there's a kind of consistent world for the characters to have lived in, and they've created some really iconic characters. So the Marvel movies have done character work. It's not always great, but even in the first 4 Marvel films, there was some good character work. There was some stuff to believe in. The first 4 films so far, the one thing they haven't really done is basically any good character work, and more than that, they're not creating characters that anybody cares if they return to. Most characters don't really show up again at all. Yeah. Sometimes you have like a Millie Bobby Brown or a Kyle Chandler, neither of whom anybody cares if we ever see again. I don't care if we see Brie Larson or Tom Hiddleston again, which we can't because that movie took place in the 70s. So
God bless. I keep calling him Tom Loki in my head.
Sometimes you're not even fully clear on how characters are related. Like I just found out / realized a recurring character from this season of Monarch is related to a semi-major character from the 2014 Godzilla movie. Did they say that at some point?
Right.
Probably. Did I miss it? Because that's just the sort of blink and you miss it characterization that they have in this universe? Kind of.
Yeah. And that is actually kind of the other side of the coin, exactly, Kevo, which is like, even though Monarch has done amazing character work for a bunch of people, and I think has gotten me really excited, and I think really shows that what can make this universe particularly special is that juxtaposition of a thing so huge, basically nobody except an adorable little girl who does sign language can talk to them. They're basically incomprehensible. They're basically forces of nature, but we kind of anthropomorphize them because they walk on 2 legs and have eyes. That in the face of us just trying to live our lives. Cloverfield did it really well. That's why people really responded to Cloverfield. That and the found footage style, making you kind of think, oh, this is a lived in world. Monarch really pulls that all together, but the problem is they've actually created such an intricate, elaborate world, and Monarch is this sprawling organization where there's so much room to say, like, this guy was there at this event that's really important. For the first bunch of years after the Avengers movie, all they did was have people say, I was in the Battle of New York. After the Battle of New York, I did this. Kate Bishop had trauma because she saw Hawkeye during the Battle of New York. Battle of New York. It really doesn't happen in that same way with Godzilla, I think, until... or with the Monsterverse, until Monarch really pulls it together. And even then, they still miss stuff, as you mentioned.
Well, and it's really frustrating because I don't want to be like weird or anything, but I am so unbelievably attached to Keiko and Bill Randa. I love Anders Holm, and I love Keiko, and I even love Lee Shaw. Like, I'm there. But like, one of the things is I've seen Bill Randa die, and it is so unbelievably fucking unsatisfying.
Yeah.
You're
As a result
so
of,
upset.
I was upset for a couple of days. Like seriously, I love this character.
Well,
Like,
Well,
I
and it's
logically love this
it
character.
sucks for a lot of people who watched it the way that, because Monsterverse is obviously in large part a ploy to, or sorry, Monarch is a ploy to convince people to get into the entire Monsterverse franchise. So if this is your first thing, you don't realize. And this, spoiler alert, guys, this is not a spoiler that really matters, but just if you have to go away for 5 seconds, you don't realize that when you're seeing Bill Randa at the start of Monarch, he's about to go back into that forest and die later in a movie in Kong Skull Island.
And that's just about the papers. That moment is just about
It's just about
papers.
explaining how that cache of papers that is important to the Monarch TV show got into the water. But other than that, Bill Randa, yeah, I mean, like, he doesn't die here. He just tosses the papers out. And then if you go back, if your first experience with the Monsterverse is Monarch, and you go back and start watching the movies, it is kind of a kick in the nuts that you're like, that guy, John Goodman is in these. I recognize him. This is exciting. And then he has a really unceremonious death. He's like the one person that shouldn't, like, I would have killed Tom Hiddleston first, because they're probably, I don't care if they make a 70s or 80s or 90s era sequel to Kong Skull Island featuring Tom Hiddleston, but I would have liked Bill Randa, who is generational, to come back.
I would really like to. I'm going to jump us into the first movie.
Yeah.
But to just jump into something else for a moment, the real monster of this movie is how out of control buff Eugene Cordero, who I
Oh my
have been
God.
in love with forever. He is evidently like a bodybuilder, and like in other films, like he literally just outright does the double flex, and like he is just a very big man, and you don't expect it. I love a fucking sleeper build.
It's kind of insulting. I really like, why are you not flexing in Loki, bro? If he's one of those guys who
Is gorgeous. Don't forget is gorgeous.
Well, no, I was gonna say, if you put in work, he can look really geeky and stupid and like just an unsexy dork. If you put him in the sunlight in a t-shirt and just let him sweat a little bit, he's the most gorgeous man alive.
Oh my God. Really, like that's a man. Like
but it's really, you put him under some sallow lighting with like a crappy shirt, and he's so good in Loki. But what's that?
You'd believe he really is Rutherford.
Exactly. He's so good in Loki, but I would have loved to have seen them go to the universe that he comes from, and he's just like
Eugene
a hot
Cordero.
dude. Exactly.
Yeah. But so let's jump into King Dragon Monster.
Wait, I got to pick.
AKK.
Finally.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevy.
Finally, took forever. Queued it up. Damn.
What is this from?
Our Flag Means Death, which she was apparently on.
Oh, dang.
He is just out of control handsome.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing it's Our Flag Means Death, actually, just based on the.
Oh, I don't think it is, because he's so young.
He's also in a movie with Joe Coy, who wrote a movie about kind of like the experience of being an Asian actor in Hollywood, and got to put in a bunch of his friends, and it's a really great moment for person of color representation in film. And
it's got to be History of the World Part 2.
Oh yeah, it looks
it's
like
drunk history. Yeah. It's drunk history.
Oh,
it's drunk
okay.
history. So
okay,
same difference as most of these things.
Like me by the end of some of our episodes, drunk history.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing I want to say with this first film is I don't like any of the characters. The acting is great or fine or whatever, but this movie challenged me to think about the live action actors as sort of a backdrop for the monster. And what's difficult about that is like, I am not a huge fan of Aaron Taylor Johnson. I find him to be, I guess, honestly, just a little aggressive in interviews, and so I find it a little hard to root for him. Just the things I look for, and I'm sure he wouldn't root for me. I'm sure he would just find me absolutely unbearable. but Ken Watanabe gave an incredible performance of a very complex character that I found myself rooting for. I usually love Juliette Binoche, but I felt
This
like
is not a place where Juliette Binoche is supposed to be.
it genuinely felt like she had a different script. And like I was never quite sure how her character was there. I don't know. This was not a movie where the acting mattered. And that's insane because you had fucking Bryan Cranston. And that's insane.
Well, I mean, you know, you had Bryan Cranston in the Power Rangers film too, so it's not. Bryan Cranston is like the guy.
Yeah, okay.
Bryan Cranston is the guy you bring in when you don't want the acting to be bad, but the acting doesn't matter in the same way. You're not trying to do an Oscar award-winning film. Bryan Cranston is great for a blockbuster.
So Harrison Toyota.
There you go.
I had to look it up. You guys were talking about this lady.
Yeah.
That's the sister.
Oh, yeah, no, that's Juliette Binoche. She's like,
Yeah.
she's Oscar bait forever.
The recurring stern agent woman from this season of Monarch is her sister.
Yeah. Which you're right, doesn't matter. That's not good enough. I'm sorry. Like this movie is 10 years old. It's also weird because like I feel like Serizawa should matter. Ken Watanabe's character should matter a lot more throughout. It's that tough thing where you don't want to say the only Japanese people in the franchise are related, but it would make a lot more sense if the two main characters of Monarch, who are Japanese, were related to Serizawa, or Serizawa was appearing in this.
Serizawa had that son who got to live out his Hugh Jackman real steel fantasy in the second movie.
True. And I think that's even something that if those characters from Monarch aren't related to this guy, we even did see they're related to each other in a weird way. Really, a lot of this franchise is weirdly about families in so many ways, whether it's like, you know, what? Go ahead.
I was family.
I know you were doing it.
Family.
Well, Monarch really tries to make it more about that, but I feel like there it is. Except we're not going to be able to show these for much longer when Vin Diesel goes to prison.
I'll put bars in front of it.
Bright lining. Well, or, you know, barred lining.
10 years later, I don't know. I'm hoping like the Brody's daughter shows up. Aaron Taylor Johnson's daughter shows up.
That is my favorite song by Damian Rice.
Stop it. Not helpful. They got to give us something. Like, they're saying family matters, but it doesn't. Don't make a family matters joke. I'll kill you. But it doesn't come up really until Monarch starts to pull stuff together. So in a film like this, where you have the gotta get back to my wife storyline, one, I don't care at the time at all. First off, because I'm already invested in these two as a brother and sister duo. True, an incestuous brother and sister duo, but like timing couldn't have been worse for that one. But like, that they never appear again, that that Aaron Taylor Johnson never shows up in these movies again, that Elizabeth Olsen never shows up, that really the only reference that we get to anything from this, like anything recognizable from the characters of this movie, is exactly that line that Juliette Binoche's character is related to somebody in Monarch. It just kind of like, if you're building a franchise, I think you can do a little bit better, but it does really appear to be kind of a thing for them that they're gonna do these movies as kind of a connected, clean slate every time. It doesn't always work for me. Like, part of the get of a franchise is the lived-in world with characters that recur, but that you really get to know and love. And all of this doesn't even speak to the fact that you don't love any of the characters in Godzilla because they're just kind of not compelling. Like, a lot of work would have had to have been done in future films. And I think ultimately that's what I'm trying to say, is that each time they introduce a bunch of characters, they kind of suck. And then it's like, we would have to do a lot of work in the next movie to make these characters that people would like. You know, Tony Stark was a grand slam right off the bat.
Mhm.
But nobody in these films is.
You know, and I think that's even part of why it's called Godzilla and not the characters in Godzilla.
Right. Yeah, it's just tough because, like, I think Monarch is showing us that it can be about the characters.
I think at a certain point you need to find a through line. You know, something
Yeah.
that I definitely felt when we were watching this. I kept calling Aaron Taylor Johnson just action figure man.
Yes.
He's just meant to be hero man. He gets into scrapes, and you know, one of his scrapes lets him just join a bunch of military people because they're like, "Yeah, you're military too. Come with us." And he just keeps like getting roped into the right place at the right time because he's hero man, and that's okay because a lot of what these movies sometimes are supposed to be is just about this dude. It's about the monster, and it's about, you know, how the world reacts to these monolithic figures that we have very little control in facing. You know, Ali Galactic makes the point of, are humans even the point? You know, sometimes they're not. And with this first singular film, with actors that you probably weren't planning on building too much around, sure, you can convince us that humans aren't the point. But you know, when we were working on the summary for this episode and I was reworking the summary, I was like, yeah, this is a fully fledged cinematic universe by this point. The number of movies that it has, the tie-in connections. So like, we need people for us to care. So that makes this a really weird pilot in that regard, having it be people who, you know, I don't think they're ever going to get these actors back in so many ways. So
And I guess my hope is, if they want to make a movie where the humans don't matter, which I'm down for, I will watch 2 hours of Godzilla smashing cities and then getting in fights with other Titans. I am so down for that. That is my favorite part of each movie, because the character writing isn't good and the acting isn't always great either. But I still love them. I really like. I'm going to tell you right now, I love basically every one of these movies. This is the worst one to me. But I just wish they would find a different. I wish they would think outside the box with. Because obviously we need some sort of human through line because we need to see it from the human scale if we're watching the whole thing like, you know, as though the kaiju movies of yore where it's a guy in a suit stomping on a small set. We obviously don't want that. You do want to see a lot of stuff like from a human perspective. But if you're going to do that and the characters don't matter and the humans aren't the point, then don't give me I'm a guy who's got to get back to his family. I have a troubled relationship with my dad story. Give me, I'm a radio DJ with no life, no connections. I wake up and smoke weed all day. And today I happen to have to be the one who reports the Godzilla attack.
I want to make sure to pass the mic to Nico. Were you holding up, or did you have something already?
No, I was joking that I'm
that you are that guy
who wakes up and smokes weed all day.
I want to make sure and pass the mic to you because I don't want you to feel talked over or nothing. But I really I want to echo TV, sorry, what you're saying, and take that further with, I wonder if that's even why so much of Monarch is built around 1 year later and these characters having this backstory that ties into that first film. Because that first film as the entry point to this universe now, it's kind of, you know, we don't care about those characters, but they put so much of that first attack affecting these characters. You know, this moment on the bridge was such a huge moment in the film, and now we have a character that we've had this whole season who was affected directly by that. So I wonder if that's even trying to like make up for it not being the best entry point anymore.
You know, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that the rest of the franchise is about multiple kaiju, and this one really only introduces Godzilla.
Yeah, it does. I do have a question about kind of scaling. Because by the time we get, I mean, Kong Skull Island is a bit of a prequel, which is fine. But then when we get to Godzilla King of Monsters, they get monster attacks in like every major coastal city in the world, except weirdly Boston until the very end. And at that point, the world has just basically been, like, how can commerce continue or anything?
Yeah.
Which they don't really address. I sort of wish they had chilled a little bit and just been like, Godzilla got in a fight with one or two other Titans in that second movie, and then you could do a third Godzilla movie where it's just him again in an entirely different place. So like now he's hit 3 cities: San Francisco, the one that he got into a fight to in another movie, and then this third city that he goes to. But by the end of Titans, every city has been decimated by a Titan, and it's like, where do we scale from there? I mean, we can do Godzilla versus Kong and sort of get into what the lore is, which is fun, but I know that the next we're New Empire we're going into Hollow Earth. I don't know, man. I mean, it'll be fine, but I was very shocked when I started watching Titan, or when we got to the kind of the climax of King of Monsters, and they were like listing off all these cities that are now decimated by a Titan.
Well, let's do some final thoughts on Godzilla before we move on into our second movie. I think this movie introduced so many important ideas to the franchise in a way that was, I want to say in a way that was digestible for new fans, but at the same time, I don't know. I think you kind of had to come with a little bit of a Monsterverse interest to really care about this iteration of Godzilla. The subsequent films and TV shows do a whole lot of work to kind of backpedal and make this all feel a little bit stronger. But as an entry point, I would say this has the weakest characters and ultimately the weakest story, though it had some really amazing graphics. They're better later on for sure, but this felt fun to watch.
This definitely, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
This definitely has the essence of Godzilla movie, of all of the Monsterverse movies, which is like, no matter what, even the best one, you sort of are kind of ambling through the human element, maybe not caring so much. And then the monster scenes are so good and so much fun. Godzilla looks amazing here. And I give them a lot of credit, actually. The Muto, the kind of original created kaiju for this one, is, I think, a pretty good character design.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I think also speaks to, they probably didn't have much of an idea that they were going to create any kind of cinematic universe out of this from the first film, because it's just called Muto. And now, but that's also a noun that they use for Titans in general. So for just a standalone film, and for one that was just sort of trying to do a Godzilla film by 2014 standards, I think they did a pretty cool job. But I'm really glad to see that the work that Monarch is doing to sort of elevate this entry point. I think that the huge devastation that this would do in 2014 is sort of why we had to jump to doing a prequel instead, which is why this had to be in the 70s.
Yeah.
All right. Well, did everybody do theirs?
Yeah.
I don't want to cut anybody off.
You good.
Kong Skull Island, visually a more gripping film for me. Not really by character, not really by story. It still felt very retreadsy, but in a way that I was excited about. Every now and then it's good to be reminded that retreading a classic, it was a classic for a reason. The thing that I was probably most impressed about was the lack of let's go with Adventures Club era spirit of adventure. We have found some natives.
Yeah.
Nonsense. So on the whole, though, I thought this was a visually exciting film that still failed to deliver a little bit on plot.
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree. I really love the Apocalypse Now reference of this art. And I love the promise that this is going to be similarly a film that includes some aspect of war is hell and it ruins soldiers. And turns men into soldiers and then just kind of kills them. And it actually does kind of have that. But they don't really have it together to make, like, okay, how is that related to the fact that King Kong is on this island? What do the two have to do with each other? They make Samuel L. Jackson into, like, he is probably one of the better characters in the entire franchise because you can really see that he has PTSD that has driven him insane and that he doesn't know what to do but be a soldier and fight the enemy. And even if it means getting his people killed, even if it means he gets killed, even if he can't stop, he's going to do it. And that's a powerful message. And that's a powerful message about what the Vietnam War did to people. That all really does matter. But these two are here to convince you successfully that King Kong is a good guy, basically. At worst, a force of nature that didn't intend to hurt you, but to be fair, you got in his way. And these two messages don't jive. War is not a force of nature. War is something that man makes. Man did not make King Kong. So it just doesn't all come together. But you are right insofar as, man, banging visuals. Again, some great fight scenes. The skull lizards are awesome creatures. It took me a really long time to figure out what was so unsettling about them, and it is that in fact they only have 2 legs, but they are on the side. Yeah, I mean, this was to me better than Godzilla, but only marginally insofar as still kind of suffers from a lot of the same problems.
Ali Galactic says, TK, you thought way more about this movie than I did. I was like, giant monkey did cool stuff and LOL Mountain Grenade Man. Yeah, and that's the thing. Your point, Ali Galactic, about dude being thrown into mountain, that sort of, for me, actually pushed my feelings on this movie in the opposite direction. I really got a lot of the war is hell stuff, but then at a certain point it was just hammering it over and over again.
Yeah.
And that was the point at which it was a little bit too far hammered.
Yeah.
Yes, the Vietnam War was hell. I don't know that anyone who came to this movie for that already didn't know it.
Yeah.
And anyone who didn't come to this movie for that would necessarily get the message you're actually trying to send, because descending it into this supernatural world, which I love. I love seeing Skull Island. That was one of my favorite parts about this movie is, I love that. Sorry. The music just suddenly started playing really loud in my head.
Oh, wow. It's still normal on here.
Oh, no, something just happened to my audio. Oh, I think I was not plugged in correctly or something. And all of a sudden my audio went from like 20 to 100. And I thought I was having a stroke. So sorry for doing that.
You need a sec?
Nico, go. No, Nico, take over. I said a lot of good stuff. Nico, go.
One of the things that I think really was most notable about the themes of this film was how much that King Kong represented natural development and sort of the way that nature takes its own course. And yet one of the things that we saw here was such a forced evolution of these characters. I found a really complicated story part came in for me with kind of coming up with ways that Tom Hiddleston's character wasn't just a lazy attempt at 1960s pastiches. They just sort of tell us, oh no, he's that guy. No, that is not a natural evolution of this character idea. Telling me that it should be so much based on the archetypes of, I don't know, the classic monster films works for King Kong, but it doesn't work for the character leads and just saying, oh, he's that guy. He can get anybody out of anywhere. I don't know. I expect a little bit of backstory for the guy.
I agree. And did they think this was going to be, he was going to do more of these? Did they think they were going to do more of these with him? Same question for Brie Larson. Same problem with Brie Larson, where, you know, they really threw her into this, like, women don't get enough credit. But, you know, our film is going to show you that women can do anything. And yet she still ultimately drowns and gets rescued by King Kong and Tom Hiddleston. And then that they did the native photography stuff, which I didn't love.
I'm not sure what we were supposed to make of that. Like,
yeah, what were we? John C. Reilly is, you know, doing his own movie that is a very fun movie that I'm cracking up at, but he also kind of fills in part of that war is hell theme where, you know, World War II was also hell, but he managed to become best friends with the Japanese man that he was on the island with who died. Okay, that's all great. Him as a crazy, wacky dude is much funnier to me in this context and a lot more fun. To Allie's point, the other really great moment in this movie is when the soldier makes the really noble sacrifice to pull 2 grenades and hopefully get eaten by a skull monster in just enough time to blow it up. And then, of course, the skull monster instead just knocks him with his tail into a mountain and he blows up. Your whole point, your whole sacrifice was in vain. You did absolutely nothing. That's a riot. That's really funny. This movie clearly was aware that it could do certain stuff. It just didn't know how to roll it all into a good ball of movie.
Well, but that even was the point I was making earlier, which is that I don't necessarily find it funny in the context. Like and Ali even said, you know, the themes of Vietnam were lost on them, and where in that context, that moment sort of trying to illustrate that. And the senselessness of war and that sacrifice that a lot of these men had to make, you know, it sort of makes it a joke out of it in a really weird way.
Yeah.
That you don't get to both tell us that war is hell and that these deaths mean something, and then also kind of make them laughable.
Yeah.
Because, you know, are we supposed to care about that soldier or are we supposed to laugh at it? I really don't think that it should be both.
Yeah.
And you kind of need to pick a lane, especially with such a, you know, I was really happy to see Vietnam War, at least in regards to, I want to see, everything is still so much World War II. I want to see more recent conflicts be portrayed in terms of historical fiction, because there's a lot more recent ones.
Well, it's kind of a second cycle, because we did so much Vietnam War from MASH onward for a while, and then we started to come back around and do World War II again, especially again, Marvel brought us Cap World War II, and now we're kind of pushing into Vietnam, which is fine. But I agree with what you're saying insofar as, like, I wish they had not done the war is hell stuff, because this is a King Kong movie and they weren't ready to do it. They weren't ready to make the full allegory and give us some insight into it. So rather than do that, it should have just been silly. And it's unfortunate because Samuel L. Jackson could have just done silly. He could have just been a hammy villain, but he actually really tried to give you the performance of somebody who was a good soldier in the American army, and then got put in a situation that put him over the edge and that, you know, made him into a villain. Yeah. and that's really cool that Samuel L. Jackson was able to do that, but this movie was not ready to live up to that standard.
Yeah.
Ultimately, excuse me. Ultimately, the film introduces a ton of other kaiju with Mother Longlegs, Skur Buffalo, Meyer Squid, Leafwing, Psycho Vulture, the Spore Mantis, and the Skull Devil, which evidently was originally going to be Ramarak the Skull Crawler.
So they called me in college.
And I do love that about it. I did love seeing all the creatures. Leafling, one of the absolute best. Just a cute little stick boy. He's very large, but not compared to the rest of the kaiju. Yeah, the visuals were phenomenal. A lot of those scenes with the other like big creatures on the island were really cool. Again, I feel like when they get into that stuff, I'm always having a really good time. And I understand why we can't do any of that without having a human presence of some kind. Although, like, again, I think another really interesting one would be documentary crew goes to do a David Attenborough movie at Skull Island. And even if you want to have a plot where something happens, just don't take it too seriously and like don't give anybody a kid that they have to get back to. A documentary crew just wanting to do their job and being stymied is enough for a monster movie where the focus is really the monsters. With these, there's always some weird attempt to be like, here's why the heart of these people is really important, and I just never buy it.
Yeah.
Well, it's wild that these two movies, Godzilla and Skull Island, were kind of the most successful based on how much they cost and what they ultimately made on budgets of 160 and 185 against 529 and 566. So it's sort of interesting that the movies that we think are the better films are maybe a little bit less well received.
Yeah, no surprise though.
And I even respect a lot of what this movie did in terms of like the period piece and trying to send a message and stuff. Like I like when stuff tries, you know. Yeah. Any dramatic piece, it's fascinating to think about what it would be like to set against the backscape of a giant monkey or like alien invasion. But yeah, it's also really heavy at times, especially when it's part of this wider universe. So, I don't know.
All right. Well, does anybody have any final thoughts on Godzilla on Kong Skull Island? I had my next card already queued up, and I'm like, no, that can't be right. The only other thing I really want to mention is that I think with this movie's post-credit scene introducing Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, it felt in many ways like this was the point at which the franchise decided it was a franchise. Ultimately, Godzilla and King Kong as two separate identities within the same realm, it feels very almost as disparate as Superman and Batman. You know, the whole idea of Superman is that he's based on like alien superness, and the idea of Batman is he's the smartest human. And so there's automatically a sort of a lean that's a little bit different. You know, King Kong, he's famous for picking up an attractive blonde woman and climbing a building. But Godzilla is every bad thing Americans have ever done to the Japanese, rolled up into one giant lizard beast who has come for our giant buildings. And so I guess they're just really into buildings. But, you know, the reality is these films could have been incredibly separate until that post-credit scene.
Mm-hmm.
And legitimately, how did you feel about that?
I don't know. I think because I knew that this was the case going into it, I just recognized the moment for what it was.
Yeah, it's easier to say from this end of things, like, yeah, that was interesting. At the time, when it had been like 3 years after Godzilla, and it was, I guess, 2 years away from King of Monsters, which would be 5 years after the first one, it definitely would have seemed like a big and weird swing. Batman versus Superman didn't go down very well, so I would have been very nervous.
I don't have any really last thoughts on this one.
Sure.
It happened. Going all the way back to the 70s felt like a really odd choice, and I just wasn't really sure where we go from here. And I still feel like the films haven't really answered that. We have kind of a huge gap between this one and Godzilla King of Monsters. And I don't even know that Monarch super answers a lot of the questions about like this era.
Yeah.
Well, we wind up in the next big era of the Monsterverse franchise. And I think the surprise for me is that I did not expect King Ghidorah to wind up being in like some ways the villain for 2 films. I actually really like what that does to the story here. I'm saying how I felt that both Godzilla and King Kong just felt like 2 entries in the same universe, but Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong, while I wouldn't say they feel like 2 parts of the same story, they definitely feel like they operate in the same universe.
It's definitely starting to feel more like it by this point. Yes, absolutely.
And this is where we start to get the environmental metaphor and the idea that the Titans are here as part of the ecosystem, that they matter in certain ways for sort of the balance of the planet. That to me starts to be a really compelling through line that can kind of be independent of whatever stupid my mom and dad got divorced and I'm sad storyline is happening with Millie Bobby Brown and Vera Farmiga. And Kyle Chandler, who I said to Nico, any movie where that says like, oh, Kyle Chandler is definitely right feels to me like MAGA propaganda. I don't even think that's intentional. It just feels that way. But I like getting into this, like, why is Godzilla here? And if we're having a Godzilla incident, what does that mean? What's going on? Because I feel like that gives us a bunch more plot options that don't then rely on make mommy and daddy love each other or get back together or whatever the F it's going to be.
Yeah, and all the stuff with Orca, it was called.
Their machine.
I should have already, and I just it's been the holidays, and I'm a fan. I'm not a scientist. Yeah. I need to look into whether or not that is something that heavily might have been influenced by the original franchise. The oxygen depleter weapon that was in these movies.
Yeah,
that apparently is a reference to the very first Godzilla movie. Fantastic. So I wonder, like, how much stuff goes over my head that actually is just references.
Yeah, Orca is not from any other movie.
It's not from anything else. Okay, so it's just weird.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's even the thing about this is, like, we're allowed to invent new weird things. But, like, exactly as you're saying, it needs to be less about this family drama. And, like, if you're being science people, you're science people. And be a scientist that invents this,
Yeah, and I think when we get to Godzilla versus Kong, I think that strikes the best balance. Because they bring back Millie Bobby Brown and Kyle Chandler, there's a little bit of like a situation to it. But Rebecca Hall is the best. Like, she's just here for the science. The fact that she has a daughter, we'll get into it there. But yeah, I mean, this is the one that really gives us, I think, some of the best fights, some of the best lore for the creatures, and having that be a really big part of what goes on in the film, and not having to be like, I specifically have to watch Aaron Taylor Johnson run around because that's important to him getting to his wife, and Godzilla is the thing keeping him from his wife. Gosh darn it, let's fix that. Which I don't care about that, rather than like King Ghidorah is about to wake up, were people seeing that happen.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the only things that I found a little confusing about some of the canon at this point is I could have used a little bit more, this is what some of the others are. They
Yeah.
went so far out of their way to be clear that Ghidorah is an alien. It could have just benefited to understand a little bit more who is terrestrial. Is Godzilla just a, you know, radioactive, radiation absorbed version of the lizard version of King Kong, since they're both kind of determined as like part of the hollow earth system, and King Kong just doesn't like radiation.
Yeah, and they still haven't really nailed a lot of that stuff down.
And frankly, you know, I loved the way that this movie ended with all of the Titans are helping the ecosystem heal. The Earth is healing. And then we get to the next movie, and all of a sudden it's Godzilla has killed every single Titan on the planet. And he's gunning for King Kong. King Kong is only protected on Skull Island by this tiny habitat. The rest of the island is completely fucked. And so the next movie starts in such a state of, well, all of the potential that was built by the last movie, like 80% of it is gone. Cool. And I wasn't sure if anyone else maybe felt that.
Yeah, I really did feel that. First off, like right off the bat, it's important to me that we see Mothra again, because just such a beautiful creature created by these films. And it would be such a waste to not bring Mothra back. Ultimately, I think there are enough through lines for any particular creature to come back. But I did think that was really, because I think they shot themselves in the foot with the end credit sequence from King of the Monsters, which is just like, this whole world exploded, you know, like after we accepted that Godzilla was King of the Monsters, just everything changed so rapidly that you would never be able to build another film in the universe that the headlines that they show you in the end credit sequence indicate the world becomes. It just wouldn't be recognizable as the world that you and I live in.
Yeah.
And so, you know, smash cut to 2021, they just say that, oh, all those creatures got killed by Godzilla, and that's why things seem more or less like they are to you, viewer of this film, which is just kind of a cheap storytelling technique.
And I guess technically they can always say more monsters crawled out of Hollow
That's
Earth,
which is exactly, and
yeah,
you know, since we're doing the next movie is a Hollow Earth movie, I do think that they will probably say like, well, more creatures will just come back. But, you know, to Nico's point, I do think there was never any lore establishing why there's just like one Godzilla, one Rodan, one King Ghidorah, and like they're not a species. I think the introduction of the Hollow Earth story kind of helps with that, but it's so non-linear the way they drop information in this franchise that it can be really tough as a viewer. You kind of have to collect it all and put it in order yourself to figure things out.
Yeah.
You know, and I just want to say to Ali Galactic's point about watching this movie 9 times when it hit HBO Max, fascinatingly enough, the Godzilla vs. Kong HBO Max launch was the most successful in history until it was bested by Mortal Kombat. So, you know, realistically talking, these films might not have had the box office run that they were hoping for, but they did come to have pretty strong streaming profiles. And I think one of the things that makes these films so engaging to look at is just the bigness of them. just the idea that it's these two larger than life giant monsters. This is in so many ways Dragonzord versus Megazord. Like, this really is just the best version of itself by virtue of getting the rights to these original characters. We're not talking about Godzilla versus Kong. This is the real thing. This isn't, some odd knockoff. Yeah, but Godzuki is official.
I know. I just love him.
I do love him.
They absolutely should bring Godzuki into this.
It's the little dancing one all the way on the right for me that is my favorite. That's me and Jonah right there. That too. So I don't know. I think the fact that this movie looks really cool can carry it a really long way culturally, and even if it kind of lets you down, it's like I have no positive vibes on the episodes of Buffy where Buffy and Faith switch bodies. I think those are two of the worst written episodes of the series, like by far. I love the ideas, but man, the scripting's weird. And to that end, though, they're still Hallmark episodes. They're still episodes you talk about, even if they're two of your least favorite. They're two you still have to register as significant moments. I feel like you could hate Godzilla versus Kong, but it's still this moment in cinema. It's still this time for these people. And I think that is really important.
I feel you. I think this is the best one. Again, I think this gets the right mix of, Rebecca Hall, is just a scientist trying to figure Kong out. She does have the daughter, but the point of the daughter is not, she never has a moment where she's like, I have to sacrifice everything for my daughter, or I will personally stop Mechagodzilla for my daughter. The daughter is just there because she can speak to Godzilla. And by the way, then it becomes the movie Congo, which is out of this world. That this girl is just signing to King Kong is wild to me. But bringing in vampire Eric Northman, God, what's his name? Bill Skarsgård,
Alexander
Skarsgård,
yeah.
Eric the Red.
Yeah.
Bringing him in, he doesn't, he doesn't have any kind of emotional appeal really, except they call him brave at one point. This was the perfect amount of, you technically have to have humans in this movie or people won't watch it. I maybe could have done entirely without the Millie Bobby Brown story. But that also was pretty inconsequential. It was very plot driven. It didn't have anything to do with her dad. It didn't have anything to do with, grief over her mom dying, which actually is almost kind of a problem because how is that not a bigger deal to you? But I'll take it in this case because it just makes for a movie that if you are not going to write good characters, if you're not going to write the kind of characters that we get in Monarch, do it like this. This is good. Just have characters that do their jobs, and by virtue of doing their jobs, they will lead us to the giant kaiju battle. And then the giant kaiju battles were awesome. Mechagodzilla was awesome. The two of them beating up Mechagodzilla was awesome. I just had so much fun with those scenes. They were a blast to watch. Yeah.
I think the weirdest part of the human drama for me, though, was that some of it just felt oddly manufactured in ways that weren't necessary. Like when they were talking about taking Kong to hopefully look into Hollow Earth and suggesting to him that he might have family down there. And they acted like they were telling him lies or doing him a disservice, but his island was dying. He did come from the Hollow Earth. Yeah. He might have family down there. And so it was just presented in such a dramatic and dire way at times, like they were doing this horrible thing to Kong potentially. But they were also potentially doing a great thing. And so it's weird. You never want to make the industrial complex look like they're too heroic. So I guess for that, I applaud it. Nico. I love you.
Oh, well, thank you. I think one of the big moments that this film had to give us was a point at which we could see Godzilla be tested in a significant way that wasn't against somebody we knew he would automatically beat. It's not that I think that Ghidorah doesn't represent a significant foil for Godzilla, but it's moreover that we would never see Godzilla lose to King Ghidorah in a significant way. We would never see Godzilla lose to Mechagodzilla even, which is why this film being called Godzilla versus Kong had me going into this film with all the wrong ideas. And one of the things is then I had to sort of sort out what we're talking about from this film as I'm watching it. And I think feeling like this movie, like I said earlier, was such a direct connection to the previous film. I don't know. I think I want to hold some judgment on this movie till Godzilla Kong the New Empire, because one of the things that I found that this two film back-to-back, I don't want to say two-part movie, because again, I feel like these really were their own films. It forced me to think about a connected universe where, like you guys said, where did Baphomet, Typhon, Sargon, Abaddon, Leviathan, where did those characters go between films? They're just defeated kind of off screen. Fine, but then what is the nature of the life cycle of a kaiju in these movies? Like, I don't know. I found a lot of things a little tough to put all together.
And that goes back to my point that like they don't seem to know how to introduce the lore and the background. Because I think there are answers to all of your questions. I just think like, and I can imagine in the next film, because it is more of them going to Hollow Earth, they will be like, oh, this is where some of these creatures come from. More are coming, whatever kind of happens. But by then, it's been like 2 years since the last film. A lot of these questions are not the purview of Monarch season 1. And what?
3 years. It'll be 3 years between Godzilla versus
Kong.
Kong.
Yes, thank you.
So just to further your point,
yeah,
it's even more time.
It's a big gap. And I just... They've got to, for all the time they spend on human drama, they could probably spend some more of that time being a little clearer about the exposition of like, this is what the deal is here. This is, or even saying like, we acknowledge the question that we have created by introducing this fact of like, if we say that Godzilla killed all of the other Titans, what is the answer to the question of, could we possibly see any of them ever again? Is this a still from the new one?
Yeah.
That's
These
great.
all have been. And they like that they're releasing some good and interesting images that have me excited and interested. Whatever this cocoon thing image seems to be, they recently talked about who the villain of the next one is going to be, and it is a very Kong-like creature. But yeah, there are so many more questions than there are answers, and I don't know how many answers they are willing to give away too quickly, and how long we are supposed to stay invested without being given concrete understanding of what exactly it is that we're watching. Because a lot of the time, some like the things that we're supposed to understand about the plot we're seeing are just, it's one line. Like there were a few times, because I was trying to keep up with the Wikipedia summaries of the movies as we were watching them at home, and there would be a moment where we're watching the movie and the line just goes by in 1 minute, and the two of them are going about their lives not giving 110% of their attention to this movie because it doesn't feel like you should have to, and it shouldn't be that you miss 1 minute out of 120 that tells you, oh, and by the way, this is happening because this. is that what this movie is going to be? And I'm not looking forward necessarily to experiencing that in theaters for the first time without a Wikipedia for the first time to tell me, oh, this is what that was supposed to be. Like, how much of that is going to end up being that is my concern. I enjoy these and this franchise as a home media experience so far. But, and just in general, more and more, I'm not enjoying the box office experience. But especially when it comes to something like this, Marvel, it's not as hard for me. But this is something that I worry is going to be a little harder.
And I think part of the concern for me is that I don't know that I've seen a multi-film animal as people character franchise outside of like Planet of the Apes. And that's not for me. You cannot possibly throw, I mean, you could give me Planet of the Apes starring Greta Thunberg, and I don't think I'd care.
Can I tell you weirdly the thing that's most bothering me about Planet of the Apes this week, since you brought it up, is specifically reading about, and once again, so many of these things are always based on novels, and then the adaptation sucks, and everyone is like, but the adaptation. No, The Princess Bride has nothing to do with the editor trying to track down the original author while he's having an affair. So no, it's not a good adaptation of that book. The book has the ape society have them live like we do. And I feel like we've never seen an adaptation of Planet of the Apes like that. It's always this, we live in camps and we are feudal even though we have control of the earth. And that's not what the book is. They live in like buildings. There's the ape character that we get to know is a scientist with like science and lab coats. And it really speaks to making sure that you are capturing the spirit of a thing. So to draw us back to what we are talking about, this does still in many ways, for as much as it's confusing, it does capture the spirit of Monsterverse and Kaiju in terms of the monster smash is good. But if you're going to try and give us myth arc and canon and history, that's a little bit.
I mean, the thing is, I like those things, and I would be down for them. They just don't write them very well, and they don't write them into the films very well. And Monarch, the TV show, I think is helping with that a bunch. I'm really interested. I hope they get a second season. I hope they pull into where things are now. And are able to kind of give that much more elongated, detailed look at everything. Cause like, I love a good sci-fi story. I was telling Nico, like the Hollow Earth stuff, I only really don't like because Hollow Earth is like very much pseudoscience that people get into, and I think glorifying any of that is weird and a dangerous game to play.
I feel like it further fictionalizes it though, at least, so that's nice. Look how ludicrous this is.
Well, I wish they would because it's also there's a weird inconsistency where they have to go through a portal to get to Hollow Earth, but then Godzilla just drills down and gets to Hollow Earth. So the portal makes it seem like they're not actually in the Earth, they're in another dimension, or they're in some kind of other plane. But then the blow in the hole really makes it seem like the Earth is hollow. Which is a bummer to me. And just
Godzilla can create portals with his breath, which again brings it back to magic. So it
brings it back to magic, and then also brings it back to we gotta explain stuff a little better. Both because internally your audience doesn't understand what's happening, and also because write internally consistent stuff. I get that the point of these is that we're trying to get to monster smash fights, and they're really fun. It's really fun watching big things smash big things, and to imagine what it would be like. God, well before these movies ever came out, there's this one giant glass, all windows building in Boston, and it's one of the taller buildings in downtown Boston, and every time I would walk by it, I would think, I wonder what would happen if all of that glass just smashed at once. And they do smash it in King of Monsters, and it was really satisfying to see. And like, that's the point of the Godzilla movie. But in the same way, the Avengers movies are all about the final battle with the big bad, whoever it is, and their horde. And still there is a lot of like, we have to have internal consistency. How did these things happen? And I just wish there was a little bit more development of all of that stuff in these films, and a little less of a feeling of like, what the fuck do you care? We're just gonna watch the lizard and the monkey fight. Like, it feels like even the producers and the writers and the directors are saying that when they put these out.
And I think the thing that I'm really curious about is, this past weekend, Hasbro sold their ownership of Lionsgate, which is a board game company, sold their movie studio because they no longer saw, I don't know, the story potential of Boggle. But the thing that leads me to say is, it's not just any group of things that are recognizable from our childhoods that translate into a film franchise. Summoning up Planet of the Apes, the MCU, one of the things that I'm kind of fascinated by is each one of those relies on characters that can speak. These films are doing it with characters that we recognize that communicate non-verbally. There's a certain artistry to the violence, because so much of the violence, it's the Eddie Izzard joke. It's, you kill one person and they take you to Texas and they hit you with a brick. You kill 8 people and they put you in a room and they stare at you forever. You kill 50 people and they're just like, well, you must get up very early, because what do you even do with that? The scale at which this presents the only things we recognize about these characters, their violence, their inability to be human, it really does make us ask, what makes a movie a movie? So often we hear, it's got to have strong dialogue. I promise you, not one of these films has strong dialogue. They say they've got to have characters that you can relate to. Yeah, okay. There are a couple of ways I relate to King Kong and Godzilla. Sure. None of them that I would say on air, and certainly none of them that are the reason I would go see a movie. So I don't know. It really does cause us to ask ourselves what makes a franchise work and why these two are the ones leading it so readily.
I mean, I think a big part of it is that they are the most recognizable. Godzilla is like Mario. It's a household name that you kind of know without even thinking about it. And similarly, I mean, Kong is a classic tale. And again, like Mario, it travels to things like Donkey Kong. Like, people associate Big Monkey with Kong. And so, I mean, it makes sense that these two would lead the franchise. I guess the question is, are they leading the franchise, or are they basically 85% of the franchise with a little bit of other kaiju and titans sprinkled on top? I don't think it has to be that way, but I don't think it can go forward if we're not really trying to establish what this universe is and what the rules are, what the lore is. This seems like a creative group that's very not into doing lore. And I think lore is what makes a big part of fandom kind of kindle its fire online during the time when there is no film. And I think part of what the other part of what makes Monarch work is the lore, is the sort of establishment of, because the one thing we get is the character story, which I think is really important. But then, like, those characters figuring out what Bill Randa's maps mean, what the radiation is, what were those lights that they saw, what is that creature, why does it exist? That's the other big question. And it seems a little bit like the Monsterverse is having to repeat itself, because the first time it explained all this stuff, it didn't do a very good job, and it didn't do a very clear job. And I like that this show can help. And if that makes it more accessible to people and makes the franchise better, that's great. But it seems like all of these years after the first Godzilla film, something like Monarch could be doing really different work if it wasn't sort of trying to clean up a lot of the not the bestness of what the movies have brought to these ideas from time to time.
I think what you're talking about is also really important to elaborate and validate what Nico is saying in terms of wanting to see these two characters, quote unquote characters, actually be characters. Because I feel like, Nico, when you said the thing about them being the characters that lead this, I the thing that popped into my head is, but are Twisters the characters that lead the movie Twister? I view them so much more as forces of nature that happen to us, but I think in many ways they do try and, play with and blur the line of whether or not these can be viewed as characters. And I think developing the canon and potentially, hopefully, giving us more in terms of what Hollow Earth means, what these characters mean, that could make them more characters. Because for the most part, we have human beings running around speculating as to what they think these beings' motivations are, without a super ton of justifiable, evidence to back them up, other than, well, they're probably right because it's what the plot dictates. But to really understand that about these figures, we do need to get more about where they came from, what their motivations are, and I feel like there still is a constant threat that Godzilla is just going to wipe out the planet. Should we? Is that a good thing to feel about this world?
Well, I don't find it comforting.
No.
Speaking of things I don't find comforting, I think I figured out that the actor we're never going to see again after next movie is going to be the incredible Dan Stevens, who is evidently credited as playing Trapper.
What a name.
Did somebody say in a headline that we're never going to see is one of the characters again? Hi, Jojo.
I'm just going by the unbelievable history of
the turnover.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a riot that every film has this person shows up again. It's Ken Watanabe from Godzilla to, well, I guess there's kind of a cutoff with Skull Island. But you've got Millie Bobby Brown and Kyle Chandler from King of Monsters to Godzilla vs. Kong. And now you're going to have Rebecca Hall from Godzilla vs. Kong to Godzilla X Kong. There's a lot of 2 movie appearances for people, but it's never more than that. The only person who has more than that is John Goodman, and it's just one more thing, and it's Monsterverse, or it's Monarch.
For 2 seconds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think part of what makes this franchise so interesting is I thought this would be a full-size normal episode. But I don't know that we're necessarily even done talking about it, but I think so much of what this franchise requires for talking about, I don't want to say for talking about what it's made from, but we really are talking, it's like a Snapple situation. It's made from the best stuff on earth. And part of what I kind of mean by that is we're talking about elements of the earth here. Godzilla is a creature of our planet, we assume, because, they only specify that Ghidorah is an alien. Mothra, who has this magical healing power. King Kong, who can retreat into the center of the... Okay, Jonah, I appreciate if you're going to jump in the middle of me talking. It's to justify some stuff that you didn't know I was looking for some justification on. Yes, I did mention that King Kong is unnecessarily buff in a very sexy, sexy way. But I think that's even kind of what I want to talk about. King Kong looks like a big, buff, hot monkey, but he looks like a monkey. He looks like a big, buff, hot monkey. I don't know any lizard that looks exactly like Godzilla. I don't know any bird that looks exactly like
Um,
Rodan.
Excuse me.
Oh, yeah, Jojo. So look,
Yeah.
it's you and me on the right. I'm very excited about you. But so
But yeah, no.
I do know one tiny lizard. But
But in
moreover,
this universe.
yeah, there's a lot of questions I have about the nature of evolution, and I don't like Hollow Earth because Hollow Earth feels a little too flat Earth for me. And flat Earth is just one of those steps too far, like Chicago deep dish pizza. I'm not looking to have lasagna bread, so it's there's got to be a limit, and I feel like I can only go so far into the Hollow Earth before I need a little bit more. Give me the stuff I'm interested in, because I don't know what executive is sitting there at the studio going, no, I'm really into this thing, the Hollow Earth thing, because it is the most consistent thing in these films for some reason.
Well, what are you interested in?
The evolution of these animals. I just kind of want to know why Godzilla can absorb radiation and King Kong gets all kinds of, hair loss from it. I want to know why Mothra has the healing golden energy of Marie Kondo telling you to get rid of what you don't want, and why I expect Rodan to have the ugly internal blackness of I can see his face, but I can't think of his name. The gross guy in Spring Breakers.
Oh, James Franco.
James Franco, thank you. I think that Rodan and James Franco have the same thing inside of them. But then Mothra is just Michelle Visage telling you how to fix your nose makeup. It's just perfect.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. Like, I would love for them to go deeper into the lore. And I just don't know. It feels like I can tell you 8 different ways that I could see to do it. Including this in this next movie. Like, if they are going back into Hollow Earth, it seems like Hollow Earth is where all these creatures come from. Like, that's the point. We could be getting exactly the answers you're talking about. But at this point, there's just as good a chance that we won't get those answers, because the fact is we had 2 movies that really presented a lot of opportunities to clearly state some of this stuff. And they just didn't. And I can't really figure out why. And it just feels like, I don't know. We have so many great, comic book writers that we talk about who also do script writing, that, like, I can think of just a lot of people who could figure out how to write these scripts in a way that really gave you something to kind of chew on. I don't know if maybe it's that the exec team here feels that they just shouldn't bother to do that stuff, and they should just be giving, don't worry about that, just do the big monster fights. And is that sustainable for these films?
I want to say that one of the ways that they make these a little bit more sustainable is with the other parts of the universe, like the music. It's hard not to notice that Godzilla has, as a franchise, has had some unbelievable artists doing the score, like Henry Jackman on Kong Skull Island and Bear McCreary of Battlestar Galactica. And, much less notably, Fox's Human Target, but y'all slept on that, not my fault. King of the Monsters, Bear McCreary. That's a lovely touch. But here's where I just need to say that Bear McCreary went the step further. He decided to not just adapt the original Japanese themes from the original Japanese movies, but he would go on to produce a cover of Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla for the film, which features a number of guest artists. One of the guest artists on this cover of Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla is Death Clock. It is legitimately Death Clock. Like,
that's amazing.
The band from Metalocalypse.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
Oh, I'm explaining that to everybody at home who might not be as familiar.
On stage.
But legitimately, when I saw that one of the contributing artists was Death Clock, I could barely not. I barely could not.
That is so amazing. I wonder if Brendan Small legitimately was involved. I mean, I guess, there's other guys that are technically in Death Clock, but I wonder if
Brendan Small, Gene Hoglan, and Serge Tankian are the main vocals.
Serge Tankian, that's the guy from System of a Down.
Okay, so I have had to explain to so many people. So at my gym has been playing a lot of chop suey, and I've had to explain to people how the little man, little man in the video, he's the whole video. That's the whole story.
It's a good story.
Sarge is real handsome.
Yes, he's a very handsome, great guy, great artist. That's really cool. I need to go listen again.
Yeah. But I just think it's so significant when an artist that you didn't even know that you appreciated their work on something you didn't even realize you appreciated it on winds up having such a significant, I guess, like impact on how you look back on something. I know that thinking about the fact that these scores are done by masters of their craft, it actually does make me want to not just listen to the score again, but listen to how it's used in the film. It's exciting that there's something that might get me to rewatch the movie, with a little bit more of a deft ear, listening out for that, because I did think that the score was really charming at times. It felt like it had that magical adventure feel in Kong Skull Island, whereas the animated show is just called Skull Island and is also technically produced. It's a rough watch, you guys. Monarch is amazing, and we're gonna get into it next week. I'm not trying to jump the shark, but man, that's a complicated cartoon.
It is endearing to me because Mae Whitman does the voice of that girl who's chucking a spear on the right there.
And decent work where she doesn't sound exactly like Mae Whitman or Katara at all times.
Yeah.
And Kong looks like he's played here by Seth Rogen as Deathlock.
Sure.
It's notable. I don't know. So I'm excited about the future of this franchise. I'm really excited to talk about the TV shows next week, most notably Monarch. But one of the things that next week's episode is going to have to include is a little bit of a look back at how we got to where we are with a number of these characters, where they slot into the bigger picture, and how you expect us to believe that Kurt Russell's character has never come up before.
Yeah.
Also, his son doing a great impression of him is, I don't know if this is something that should be saved for his dad's retirement party and a family barbecue, because there's something a little too intimate about a son playing a younger version of his father. I don't know. There's something a little, whatever is the actual version of Uncanny Valley.
It was always going to happen. I feel like that it happened in something associated with something as hammy as the Monsterverse. I was just kind of like, better this than giving us old man U.S. agent played by Kurt Russell. That would have been a real bummer.
Or like a heavy father-son drama piece. Like, no, this is nice. This is fine. I actually don't find them too identical even. Like, I'm not saying it's one of Kevo's things where he's like, I had no idea they were father and son in real life. But, like, I don't necessarily find them to be playing so identically the same character that it gives me that same Uncanny Valley feeling, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think it comes across in their performances. I think that this is a guy who's just imitating his dad. Like, there's something a little, you do this with your piano in your living room at your dad's retirement party, not on TV.
I get what you're saying. And I don't think you're wrong. I just, like, in accepting that it was always going to happen, that some producer was always going to think, like, people are really going to get drawn in by Kurt Russell's son playing the same character. this is a plausible place to have that land.
All right, guys. So I'm gonna call it. Do we have any final thoughts on these movies before we transition in for the TV shows next week?
If you haven't watched them, watch them. Even these two here that I think are the worst of the bunch are fun. They're good for a single watch. All of them are good for a watch. They're really enjoyable. I think my big thing is like this could be a top tier cinematic universe with a really cool balance of stuff. This is like a shop that just has so much cool merchandise that should sell for a lot, but it's just kind of strewn across the floor, and the carpet's gross, and it's just the lighting is not good. But all of these things are fixable, and I wish they would fix them because I love the stock. Like I so want to play with it. But if they don't, then it's just kind of a fun place that I'll rummage around in every now and then.
TK loves it if he says he loves it and then lists all the things that are wrong with it, but then says that they're fixable and he loves it.
You must really
correct. It is correct.
I mean, it's the nature of, I think, falling in love with a fandom. You don't just love the ideas, you love the potential of the ideas. So it's not, saying these films are bad. It's saying that there is even deeper magic that can be unlocked through examination, repeated watching, and discussion.
Yes.
Kevo, you made watching these so much more fun, as did Jonah, who watched them with us. Getting to watch these with people added a little bit of that, oh, this is fun. Like anybody who's ever watched The Room alone, and I mean like, oh, Mark, you are the expert, haha, funny Room, not like, oh, Jesus, Room, right? Anybody who's ever watched The Room by themselves, you just feel like an unpopular alcoholic. So like it's watching it with a room full of people that makes it exciting, that makes it fun. I think what I'm trying to say is that Tommy Wiseau better be the next kaiju.
Oh, I'd love him in one of these. Oh, it's a monster, huh?
Oh, of course the earth is hollow. Ha ha.
I think a lot of how I will ultimately feel about these is going to depend on my digestion of what we've watched so far and what ends up happening when we come back to this in April to discuss what kind of looks from a distance like it just says cuck right now, which is Godzilla Kong.
I read it as cock.
Well, I like that too. Jonah explained to me that the X in the middle is not pronounced, so it's just Godzilla Kong, which also gave me a new appreciation for the Avengers X-Men Eternals crossover, because the X in the middle, it then isn't a versus. It was supposed to be a team up all along. What a waste. You got to explain these things to people. I don't know how the rest of the world is going to pronounce this. People are just going to say Godzilla X Kong. We're probably going to call it GXK. So we'll be back to talk about GXK in April, and we'll see how we feel about that franchise then.
I just wish it looked like a G and not a... Like, I wish it looked like a G, not
a
C. Because to me, it looks like a C.
It does. So it's weird.
There is a very tiny piece of serif.
Oh yeah, it's there.
Yeah,
no, I'm not like explaining it to you. I'm saying like, what a weird thing to do for this movie that's all about big stuff.
Especially when look at any of the other Godzilla posters. Have any of the G's ever been this nebulous before?
Right.
It really makes you think about how you could never figure out how the Disney D was a D when you were a kid.
Yeah.
I'm always like, why does it say Gisney? Okay. I think we're going to call it. Right. So last time through, favorite monster that we watched. I think my favorite monster from this set of films was Vera Farmiga. Her character was out of control. She's my favorite thing in The Conjuring, which is right up there with Alien as one of my favorite things in the universe. I said universe, but I saw Tasty Cake make the reference to Mavity, and it made me say university. Great time to end the broadcast. No, I did think that I would have really appreciated if her character had the opportunity to showcase her depth, but ultimately she wound up feeling very one-sided and like part of the problem when
In
she
so many weird ways, yeah.
with 2 lines of dialogue, you could have made her the fucking hero of the whole franchise, and it wouldn't have even been anything. But, reasonably speaking, though, I do think a combination of Kong for those lats and Mothra for that spread. So I guess kind of the same thing for both of them were my favorites. And Kyle Chandler's MAGA hat.
I'm really giving it to Mothra, Ghidorah, and then a special shout out to Behemoth the Mammoth that you see very briefly attacking Rio de Janeiro, who shows up to bow to Kong or to Godzilla at the end of the film. I just think a giant mammoth is cool, but we don't really get enough of it. I imagine he would have like an old-timey man voice, and I just like that. But Mothra, cunty as fuck, just living for it. Ghidorah, we love an alien queen. Just go for it, Irene Dubois.
Yeah, I don't think that I knew before we started doing this that King Ghidorah was actually an alien. And I think that that is such a cool element of this, to have there be like terrestrial monsters versus extraterrestrial ones. It's very Cthulhu, whatever those things are called.
Eldritch
Terrors, thank you. I'm like, the ones, the scary bros. I'm sure Cthulhu loves hearing that. But then, Godzilla, give it up to the original in terms of what this was as a monster universe, even though King Kong technically came first in so many ways, which is fascinating.
Well, I can't get over thinking of them as the world's worst ever frat. They are Alpha Beta Kaiju. And Kevo, thank you so much for producing the ever-loving shit out of the show. You did a beautiful job. We had some tech problems throughout the day today, and this guy still churned out something that is just the finest and the most beautiful, and so grateful. So, Kevo, where can everybody find you online if they want to find out all about your awesome production?
Well, thank you, Fearless Captain, as always. I've really enjoyed this suggestion and doing this deep dive, and I'm looking forward to continuing it next week with the finale of Monarch. In the meantime, you can probably find me on the socials over at Kevo Really. That's KEVOREALLY. Teak, where can the folks don't find you?
You can find me at TK Elemental. Nico, where can everybody find you?
Well, you can find me being all excited about Drag Race coverage tomorrow. I'm going to do my best to have a little didn't just come here to dance ready to go. Then we got some premieres. We got some stuff going on. It's going to be a great time. So check us out this weekend for a little bit of TV. Check us out on Wednesday for a little comics magic. And then we'll be here to Monarch the Butterflies or whatever, but much less sad. Ooh, this would be a much less sad Asia Monarch than we would cover on Drag Race. So I can't wait. I want to thank you all for being a part of the fun. Oh yeah, this episode was amazing. This was out of control fun. Me and TK just, I believe the phrase is popping off. It was
a lot of fun to watch.
And I also want to say thank you, Ali Galactic. A fun time was had by all of us as well. We love being in your nebula.
Yeah.
And of course, love to Tasty Cake, love to JoJo, love to Tori Sheen, who is going to watch this later. You can find me at Nico Action. That's NICOACTION. And until next time, I want you guys to do 3 things. Number 1, you got to stay safe because big kaiju. Number 2, be brave because big kaiju. Number 3, the kaiju evolve daily. So I don't know how that's something you have to do, but do your best. And we'll see you.
So you can compete with the kaiju.
Okay. Get ready.